G'day guys, welcome to another video. What we're going to focus on today is our formative assessment lesson. So if you remember, we discussed at the start of the year, I'll just adjust this for you. We discussed at the start of the year that you will have sort of two different types of assessments. So you'll have your normal school assignments, but you'll also have the opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge that will go towards your final assessment grade throughout the term. So this is one of three areas of formative assessment that we're going to be looking at in this topic of human well-being. So what this one is going to focus on today is human well-being, but it's going to link the geographical skill of population pyramids within that. So to get started, like we usually do, I'll get you to write down the learning intention and success criteria in your book. Now, you don't need to write this bit here in yellow. This is just to let you know that we're going to be assessing these two outcomes this lesson. So we're going to be looking at how well you can explain characteristics of a range of places, and then we're going to be looking at how well you process geographical information by using appropriate geographical tools. So the first one is looking at how well you process information in terms relating to human well-being, and the second one is more looking at how well you can apply the geographical skill to that. So our learning intention today is to examine contemporary trends in human well-being. Now I want to break down that word contemporary. Again, you don't need to write this, it's optional here if you would like. The main thing I want you to get down is the learning intention and success criteria. But just so we know what we're writing about, contemporary simply means something that's modern or in the present day. So when we're asking for contemporary trends in human well-being, we're looking, again, we know trends are things like data. So when we're looking at statistics, the more recent the data, the more contemporary it is. So we're wanting to examine current trends in human well-being, in other words. So what are the main modern day, probably within the last 2 or 3 years, what is the trends that we're seeing in human well-being in Australia? Now our success criteria, to know that we've done that correctly, is that we're going to be able to construct a successful pyramid graph and analyze the trends. Now remember, the word trends there means patterns or change. So we're going to be looking at the patterns of the pyramid. You know, what does it mean if it's large at the bottom and skinny at the top? What does it mean if it's skinny at the bottom and fatter in the middle and then larger at the top? We're going to be looking at a few of those different sorts of questions and answering them today. So once you have gotten that down, we're going to move to this slide. So you don't need to write any of these core notes. This is just for your reference to learn on how to actually use a population pyramid. So when we're analysing the population data, there are certain things that you want to note. So it's usually called a population pyramid because, as you can see here, it looks like a pyramid. The base starts quite thick and then it goes up to the top at a point. So when we're looking at a graph like this, I'll just move this over a bit so you can see, is we've got the percentage of the total population down the bottom on this axis, and then on this axis here we have the age in years of the population. Okay, so this paragraph, or this graph, sorry, is telling me that on ages 0 to 4, and we've split here by male and female as well, that's usually how they're split, is close to 10% of people aged 0 to 4 in this population are male. Probably you would estimate as what, 9.8%. And then if you go female, we've got a little bit less at 9.5. So altogether we've got roughly 20% of this entire population is aged 0 to 4. So that when you have a wide base, this usually indicates that there's a very high birth rate, and that the population tends to be a lot younger because most of the people here in this population are under the age of 30. You would probably have at least, I mean, I'm just doing a rough calculation in my head, but I'd probably say at least 50% of the population is 25 and under in this country, Niger. Now, what this is also telling me is that there's relatively few people of working age supporting a young population. So that means a lot of people who are younger here might be having to be going to work a lot earlier in their life, because we can see that there's not nearly as many people that are alive up here. So for example, if we look at people who are aged 55 to 59, there's about 10 times more people aged 0 to 4 than there is there. So that's quite a big difference. And so when we look at having quite a narrow top, that generally means, especially when there's a wide base, that the death rates are higher than most countries, and that life expectancy is quite low. So for example, if you've got close to 10% of people of the entire population being born here, and only less than 1% are making it to the age of 80, then that's really quite a low life expectancy in that country. So there's lots of different things that we can see within that graph there. Now when we're analysing a different population pyramid, this is what this previous graph we looked at tends to be more what we'd call developing countries, whereas these ones look at more developed countries. So when we're looking at Indonesia, for example, you can see it doesn't actually really look like a pyramid at all. Looks more like a bottle of Coke almost, right? How it curves out like that. So what this pyramid is showing us is that the birth rate in this country is a lot lower than it is in Niger. So that's attributed to the narrow base. Now we can see here that the majority of people in this country are between the ages of 35 and 50. 35 and 54, sorry. So that's where the bottleneck of the population pyramid is. So what this indicates to me is that there's a large group of working age people to support both the smaller groups here down the bottom, the younger groups, but also the elderly here. And then we can see that over 60, it's still quite large here. So the life expectancy of people in Indonesia is quite high. And we can even see that there are more older women than there are men. So there's lots of different trends and statistics that you can notice there by looking at this graph. Now naturally all of these percentages, once you add them up, will equal to 100%. That's going to be important later. This here is just a different kind of population pyramid here. We can see it's more pyramid shape. It doesn't quite bottle like this. This is Italy in 2020. So here what we're seeing is it's still a relatively lowish birth rate, but it's not as low as, say, Indonesia. But it typically tends to narrow at the top. So generally it's still got a longer life expectancy than most third world countries, but it's not quite as good as Indonesia. And that's evident in the amount of year range that this goes up to. Okay, so you tend to have a more of a pyramid shape with this one here, and each country is very different. So if we were to look at these two different countries, Niger and Indonesia, like we did up earlier, in summary, we would note that countries with a really large base of their pyramid have a very high birth rate, and if it's quite narrow at the top, they've got a low life expectancy. And the opposite we can see here is true. So to hypothesize some differences there, even in just very general vague terms with human well-being, you might say that Indonesia has better healthcare facilities because their life expectancy is much higher than Niger. You might also say that they've got a higher economy because there's more people that are middle-aged that are working, as opposed to here where you can see that tapering off. So there's lots of different bits of trends or data that you can analyze from looking at two different population pyramids. Again, they're speculating a lot. What I want you guys to do now is this sheet would have been attached to your Google Classroom. Now you've got two options on how to record this. If you have a printer at home, you could print this out and glue it into your book and work from it. That would be great. If you don't have a printer, that's absolutely fine. What I'd like you to do instead is, again, you've got two options. One, you can rule this up in your geography book. It'll probably maybe take you 10 minutes or so to do that. However, if you do want to save a little bit of time, I would recommend going to your maths book, ripping out a bit of paper so that it's already all gridded for you, and all you have to do is add the numbers up and down the sides. Okay. So what we're going to do now is learn how a population pyramid or construction works. So we've got the age column here, which is represented here. And you've got the male percentage of the population and the female percentage. So the males here go on the left hand side and the females go on the right hand side. Now what I would recommend is doing males and females in different colors. So what we're going to be doing is filling out the data here into this population pyramid. So what we can see is that the data is already filled out for us. So for example, the age range of 0 to 4 of males is 3.4%. So what I'm going to do is, you can use your ruler to be exact, or you can get very close, usually without the ruler, is I'm going to go up to, there's 3.5 here, so this is 3.4%. So I'm just probably going to go a little bit below here, and what I'll do is I'd colour in all the boxes there up until the end. So I draw a little line up at 3.4 here, up and down like that, and then I would colour and shade all of that blue. If I was to look then at females, is 0 to 4 is 3.2. I would then on the females go out to 3.2, which is about here, draw my line up, and then shade all of that in a red colour. Now what you'll end up having at the end is something like this. Now note these are in the same colour, but what you'll end up having towards the end is something like this. Once you fill in all of them, one here, one there, one there, one there, one there, one there, and you go through your graph like that, you'll end up having your population pyramid built. Once that is built, a good way to check that you've done it right is just to, what I do is I cross-check and tick them off once I go. So once I've drawn it all, I just go males, okay, 3.4, 3.3, 3.2, etc., and then I tick them off as I go. After you've completed that, so pause this now and do that first. Once you have done that, and now that you have, look at these mandatory questions here. So this is where I want, it says refer to Australia 2020, that's referring to this here, Australia 2020. So you're going to be referring to this graph here and this here. You don't need to worry about getting this down in your book. You can if you want, but you don't have to, because the information is going to be here in the population pyramid. So what I want you to note is which age group is highest for males and females. So you might write males equals whatever the age group is, then females equals whatever the age group is. Question 2 is what is the total percentage of males in comparison to females? So how you would work that out is you would add up all the percentages here in a calculator. So 0.2 plus 0.5 plus 0.9 plus 1.4 plus 2.1, etc. And then you would write that down here for males, and then you do the same here for females, or you can just write the leftover amount there. Then I want you to answer questions 3 and 4. So what does Australia's narrow base suggest about our birth rate? So you're gonna, that's a little hint there that this should be quite a narrow base. Australia's population pyramid only starts to become more narrow around the age of 60 plus. What does this suggest about Australia's population? So again, trying to guess some trends, you know, if we're living a lot longer, what is it that we're more likely to have? Is it better healthcare services, do you think? Do Australians earn more money? So things like that, I just want you to consider and think about when you write that. If you do have any questions, that's it for the formative lesson. After you've completed this, continue working on your assignments with your groups, making sure you email your teacher if you have any questions. Thanks everyone.